Welcome to Castle Talk, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. I'm Mackenzie, and today we're talking to
Rain Nox.
amazing. So, Rain is a writer based in Austin. And please go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I just published my second book with Castle Bridge. It's actually my fourth book overall, but this one was really exciting to me because there's basically like two things that I've always loved, like environment and nature and music. And in the first book in the series, it was really kind of about the nature part, animal part. And in the second book, Magic and Melody, we really kind of get into more of the music part. And so that's like just one of the big parts of me is like music. So I guess that's what there is to know about me. Music, nature.
Totally, yeah. I mean, that's kind of one of the questions I had for you. I feel like you've had such a dynamic creative journey. I know kind of going from music composition to like fiction and writing in general. What do you think kind of led that transition?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it was really the pandemic. Um, because of course, if you're going to write a musical that involves so many people, and not that writing doesn't, but not in the same way. And I mean, the biggest one is the audience. Like you can read a book in your house, but you have to go somewhere to see a musical in the theater. And so at that time, I kind of felt like that door was at least temporarily closed. And like I had all this creative energy that I needed to use. And so I just thought, well, I mean, I can kind of write because I've written like, the book for musicals. So why don't I just try just writing straight up books? And I did, and I loved it. So I plan to just keep on doing that forever.
Totally, yeah. Do you think kind of comparing writing something that's for like maybe a physical public audience versus something like someone that's just kind of in their solitude, do you miss when that was kind of the case, or do you kind of like writing in more of like an intimate setting?
Well, so when I wrote musicals, it was somewhat solitary, but I think the big difference is that when you write a musical, you're counting on the performer. They're gonna make it everything or nothing. And like when you're writing, like you better put it all in there because yes, person is going to imagine in their head, but they're going to hopefully imagine what you wrote. And so like, especially like a lot of my musicals were kind of more comedic. So it's like you're really relying on the actor and in writing a book, you don't have that. So it's almost like more pressure.
Totally. That's so interesting. Do you think your background in music kind of influences your storytelling and how you kind of like present that?
Maybe. I mean that's hard to say, but like I oddly enough, when I did musical stuff, I really like more short form stuff, so like one act things. Um, but then I don't like short stories, which makes no sense because it's like you think they would be, similar. Um, but I always like when I wrote musicals, it was always very kind of almost scenario based. And so it's been a little tricky to write books that are longer or that cover more time and have more characters because I was always so limited in musicals to like want to keep it small scale and having a small cast and things like that. And so there's so much more you can do when writing a book. Like there's so much fewer limitations. So that's been really nice.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in terms of Animal Charmer, this new book, I know kind of learning a little bit more about Lucy. Um, how do you think this concept kind of came to mind to you? I know you kind of touched on that a little bit between like music and the environment and kind of where that has taken you, but where do you think Lucy came about?
So so the first book, Animal Charmer, like there was a lot of that is my life. So like I actually do work for an environmental consulting firm. And
Mhm.
so like I used to make maps, sit in a little cubicle. And so that's like a lot of her really was me. I wish I could talk to animals. That'd be awesome. Unfortunately, I don't. Um, so yeah, a lot of that was like kind of just really me. And then imagining like, well, what if there's other really awesome part of that happened and like talk to animals and do field work and be out in the forest and cool things would happen. And then the second book too, Magic and Melody, like some of that's a little bit me too. Like I did join a community choir. It did not have an evil conductor, but it's something that she and I did have in common.
Totally. Do you kind of approach writing differently depending on the audience or where you kind of want to take the book in terms of genre or age group or audience in general?
So I've only experimented a little bit. Like the second book I wrote, I guess is women's fiction. I don't know. I think that's a weird name for genre, but whatever. Um, and that it's not magical. And I kind of felt like with fantasy, like there are a lot of people in my business industry who were kind of like, oh, fantasy, I don't really do fantasy. And so I kind of felt like this other one would be more like appealing to more people, but then it turned out to not be the case. Um, so then now I'm just kind of like I just don't worry about it. Like and Jason of Castlebridge, like he always had good advice of like write the book you would want to read. And like so that's kind of what I do. Like I just write like would I like to read this book and then I don't worry about really the audience or the genre or anything.
Totally. That's super cool. I guess in terms of like your writing and your creative process, one of the questions I was wondering was, do you listen to music when you write?
No. I do
Really?
not. Well, okay. So I will say there's one tiny exception. No, because, and the reason is very specific, and that is music is completely immersive to me. Like, I don't understand it being a background thing. Like, if I'm listening to music, that's like literally what I'm doing. Like, I'm listening to it. And so I don't know how people can like write and listen to music like that. No way. But when I wrote Magic and Melody, I did purposely listen to some choral music while I was writing the parts where she was in the choir, just to kind of get that feel of like what it was like to be singing in a choir. But otherwise, I like it quiet.
Interesting. Do you have any other like specific writing like rituals or habits that kind of like maybe get you into the zone or kind of like keep you chugging as you're kind of drafting and
Well, much like Lucy, tea. Like I have to have
Really?
tea while I write. Yes. So it's always like morning. I'm the best in the morning. And so cup of tea, start writing, preferably in as close to quiet as possible. Sometimes I put on a noise generator. And that's just like makes my space.
Totally. That's so fair. What's your favorite tea?
Um, I like herbal teas, like flavored green teas, because
Love.
then I oh, you get the antioxidants. I don't know.
Yeah, you got to get the most out of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I guess, going forward too, if Animal Charmer in particular were to be made into like a film or a series, do you think you would have like a dream cast? Have you kind of thought about if this were to become something that was like a live action or something of that nature?
Oh my gosh. No, I haven't thought about that because that seems like such a pipe dream. And like, I'm the wrong person to ask because like I don't know like what anybody's names are like of actors.
That's
So,
fair.
which is ridiculous because like I watch a huge amount of television and movies, but I still like don't like I just don't know like who directors are and actors and stuff like that. So, yeah, I
That's
don't
fair.
know.
You're just an enjoyer. That's totally cool.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything in particular in terms of like writing advice that you've received kind of going into the world of novels and that kind of realm that's kind of helped you really find yourself and your voice?
Hmm. I don't know about necessarily finding a voice because I think because I already had done the musicals that I kind of like already kind of was what I was. But when I started writing, I did look up a lot of different advice and like for me, the outlining is really important thing. And I hate that because it seems like so non-creative. And so at first I was really resistant. And like when I wrote Animal Charmer, like I didn't have an outline. I didn't have it in like subdivided into chapters as I was writing it. I just like wrote it. And it was such a mess. It ended up taking me so long to like sort it out. So then when I wrote my next book, which was not Magic Melody, it was like an unrelated book, like I was like, I'm gonna try the outline style. And that it worked so much better. And not only that, but like if you have an outline, you can't really get writer's block. And I didn't really realize that, like how important that is, because you know what you're gonna write next, because you already outlined it. So as much as I don't like being an outline person, apparently I am an outline person.
How funny. Do you think there was any like jarring difference between writing like Animal Charmer and Magic and like do you think there was anything in particular that you saw in differences like how you approached it or if you kind of learned something from one book that you took into the next or vice versa?
Um, I don't know that there was anything super different, but one thing like that I struggled with was if you write a sequel, it's always how do you not bore people who read the first one with the details of what has happened, but then also make it so someone could just pick it up and didn't read the first one. And like how much detail you do you put in, you know? And like that stressed me out a little bit. Like how do I introduce people that like she can talk to animals, but not like rehash it, you know? So
Totally.
that I think that was a little more challenging. That and like at some point having to go back and reread the first one to make sure I didn't mess up anything that like existed, in that world that I had forgotten about.
Totally. Do you think there's anything about your writing process that would kind of surprise people, like just in general, maybe not even in the midst of a specific book?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it would surprise anyone to hear that like some days I think everything's just horrible. Like this is total garbage. And then I'll reread it like a week later and be like, this isn't bad. But I think that's probably pretty typical. I hope. I don't know. I hope it is. But that's me. It's like just up and down. Like this is just awful. This is the worst thing ever. Why would anyone read this? And then like, oh, I kind of like it. Like,
I think I would say, I'd imagine that's very typical writing process. I
yeah,
think for me as a journalism student, I feel that way. Just because I feel like you can reread the same thing over and over and you're like, no, this doesn't make sense. And you'll revisit and you're like, that made perfect sense. It was fine.
yeah, yeah. Just depends on the
Totally.
mood you're in too.
Totally,
Yeah,
absolutely. You have to have like the set has to be seen and like the scene has to be set and all of that. So I get that.
yeah.
Totally. I guess kind of looking into the future, do you think there's still kind of a dream in terms of creativity that you haven't tackled yet, but you kind of would like to, or kind of going forward between maybe books or maybe going back to musicals, or where does that kind of sit in your head?
Yeah. So I'm like a very goal-oriented person, and so I have this goal that I'm going to write and publish 10 books before I decide if it's actually something I want to do. Because I honestly feel like there's so much to the process, not just of writing, of like putting stuff out there also, that it's just like so overwhelming that I feel like you can't even know if you really like it unless you did that many. And I know that's an arbitrary number, but that's me. So that's the plan. Um, and then as to whether or not I'll go back to musicals, like my big thing lately is I just haven't had any really good ideas. But if I think if I did come up with a really good idea, that I probably would. So I don't know. That's just kind of like hanging out in the background for now.
Totally. No strict constraints. That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think, I guess in that nature too, if someone's just discovering your work, do you have a specific book or project that you would kind of recommend that they start with?
Um, yeah, so I mean, I think Animal Charmer would be the one because I mean, to me, it's what I like. It's friendship and magic and nature, and that's kind of those are the things that I like. Like, I like cozy fantasy. I like to get away from the world. Like, yes, there's evil people in it, but it's not like violent or you know what I mean. It's to me, it's like a nice contrast to like a lot of the troubles that are in this world and just having a time to just escape from all that.
Totally. Yeah, that's kind of the best way to do it. Absolutely. Well, I mean, that was so cool to learn about a little bit more about you and kind of your process and everything. I'm super excited to kind of see where everything takes you, and I'm sure those 10 books will really get you going and I'm excited to see where all of that kind of comes. So I'm super happy.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me. It was really fun.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll connect again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Amazing. Have a great rest of your day, Rain.
All right, bye.
Thank you.